Part 27. Man at the Top of the Food Chain. Author, Xionglang Guo. Chapter 261. I saw the first tentacle drawn up, hundreds of meters thick and dozens of kilometers in length, drawn down towards Li Enping. Visually it looked like a mountain pressing down. In terms of appearance alone, this blow could destroy several blocks directly. Facing the terrifying blow, Li Enping stretched out his right palm to block it in front of him. Boom! With a loud noise, the mountain-like tentacles were stopped directly in mid-air, and air waves visible to the naked eye scattered from the place where the two collided. If Li Enping simply caught it with his palm, then even if his strength was strong enough, the opponent's size would still be enough to sweep him away, or he could directly penetrate Huey's tentacles. However, Li Enping also had a void force field. The transparent and colorless force field held up the tentacle, preventing it from moving forward another meter. The strength is about 28, but the speed is only 20, not suitable for hard wiring blocking the tentacle with one hand. The strength shown by the opponent's tentacle flashed in Li Enping's mind. Although it seems that the strength and speed are not as good as Li Enping, this is just a tentacle. After the first tentacle hit, the remaining dozens of tentacles all hit Li Enping's position hard. Dozens of impact sounds merged into one, and the air waves rolled up hit Li Enping within 10 kilometers. The entire space was swept across. Li Enping had already dodged the subsequent attacks. He appeared on top of the pink mountain of meat as if teleporting. Seeing the mountain of meat under his feet descending at a speed of more than 10 meters per second, he shouted low and punched out. It was like a direct hit from an intercontinental missile. The explosion splashed countless pieces of flesh and blood, like a bloody rain in the sky. After one punch, his entire body had disappeared again, and the place where he had just stood was. It has been swept by several tentacles again. The entire Roshan mountain that can be seen with the naked eye covers an area of hundreds of kilometers. Just above this area, Li Enping's figure disappears and appears. Every time he appears, it represents a punch, like hundreds of missiles. It kept blasting towards the Roshan, and the entire surface of the Roshan was almost constantly spurting blood, turning into a pool of blood, and its bloody smell covered 100 miles in radius. It makes people think that they are in the blood sea of Shura. Although those tentacles are powerful, if 4 or 5 tentacles hold down Li Enping at the same time, it may be very troublesome for Li Enping to break free, but their speed is much worse than Li Enping. Although countless hurricanes were rolled up in the air and the shock wave caused damage to Kyoto for the third time, there was still nothing that Li Enping could do about it, which was moving at high speed. Although he had the upper hand in the scene, Li Enping's expression was still solemn. After a series of attacks, he only had 1 minute left to explode. But although the Hui in front of him looked horribly injured, it was actually just a little bit of blood and wounds. Compared to his size, which is as big as Dongyang, it doesn't matter at all. As his body slowly woke up, more and more tentacles were stretched out, and Li Enping's dodge space became smaller and smaller. What's even scarier is, Gray's body instinctively transmits the vitality to the location of Mount Fuji, the vitality that has been accumulated for thousands of years, the vitality that was obtained by killing countless Dongyang people, and the vitality that was devoured by wild beasts. Zhen was providing a steady stream of support to Huey's wounds, allowing the area where he was attacked by Li Enping to heal at an astonishing speed. Another black air bullet hit Roshan's wound, and the thought energy mixed with the air. Fist strength, 3 kinds of power combined into one, exploded with a power comparable to cloud explosion bombs. Even Li Enping would need more than 10 seconds to hit such a full-force attack. But now, after the explosion, the wounds tens of meters deep and thousands of meters long are healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Although Li Enping's attack was powerful, it was supported by the explosive form, but even so, it was still difficult to destroy Huey's brain. Not to mention that 1 minute later, Li Enping's physical fitness dropped back to 29.9, so I'm afraid no one can stop Huey's awakening. The angry ashes will devour everything in sight. Just the tsunami generated by his turning over is enough to kill tens of millions of people. With one deep breath, he created a storm that could endanger half of the continent. If it hits the continental shelf again, volcanoes, earthquakes, and floods may kill hundreds of millions of people. This was when Hui just moved his body and didn't really use any attack methods. Li Anping could imagine that once Hui truly wakes up, all human beings will face catastrophe. And he is the first target to be eliminated by Hui. Looking at the mountain of flesh that kept sinking and regenerating under his feet, Li Anping looked up again at the tentacles that were gradually covering up the sky and covering almost half of Kyoto, and he frowned deeply. This can't go on like this, it will never end. Come here. Baiyu, the capital Kikan, inside the imperial palace. Fang Yahuang was looking at the screen in front of him, which was playing the Amist Federation channel, news about Dongyang and Daxia. At 2 o'clock in the morning today, Daxia's Heilong aircraft carrier formation attacked Dongyang Navy in Dongyang, annihilating more than 10 battleships, and launched a series of terrorist attacks in Kyoto, killing millions. According to expert speculation, Daxia may have dropped some new type of strategic weapon in Kyoto. Judging from the satellite cloud map, the entire Kyoto has suffered a devastating blow. The power is comparable to that of a nuclear bomb. In addition, large-scale turmoil and bloodshed occurred throughout Dongyang. The government has not yet expressed its position on Daxia's military action. Baiyu is a small country and a poor country. They have no spy satellites or other high-tech detection methods. When they have almost completely lost contact with the entire Dongyang, they have basically no idea what is happening there. Even Fang Yahuang, the Lord of Baiyu, can only rely on reading the news of the Federation to understand the situation. At this moment, Fang Yahuang suddenly felt a black screen in front of his eyes. The incarnation of Li Anping's mind left in his body had drilled out of his chest. The black incarnation of mind was like a living thing, floating in the air. The incarnation glanced at Fang Yahuang and said, "I need the incarnation to come to Dongyang, so I will leave Baiyu temporarily. Don't make any extra movements." Fang Yahuang's face changed, and he said respectfully, "I dare not." The incarnation did not speak. An invisible force radiated out from him to a position of 600 meters around him, killing all the mortals in the palace, and collected tens of thousands of souls in an instant. Then the entire black incarnation of the mind flashed and disappeared in front of Fang Yahuang. To be continued. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xionglang Guo. Chapter 262. The incarnation of the mind energy flashed and appeared directly behind Li Anping as if teleporting. This is one of the abilities of the incarnation of the mind energy. No matter how far away from Li Anping, he can be recalled instantly when Li Anping needs him. The incarnation of the mind energy is a means that can only be formed after Hei's ability reaches the 4th energy level. It is also the strongest power that Hei can have at the 4th energy level. Because of Hei's disappearance, Li Anping cannot know exactly what abilities the incarnation of the mind energy has. He can only study it slowly and accumulate experience slowly. So far, in addition to the void force field, there is only the recall of the body to help restore the mind energy. But in addition to this, there is another ability that is not considered an ability. Hei once told Li Anping that the incarnation of the mind energy has stronger power and speed than the body, and a stronger physique. That's why he will take over the incarnation of the mind energy to turn the tables. He didn't lie. If before the 4th energy level, Hei relied on the powerful of his body to fight, then at the 4th energy level, the incarnation of the mind energy is his strongest means. The stronger the mind chi incarnation. Because Li Anping has always given the impression to the outside world that he relies on his to fight, he deliberately did not use the mind chi incarnation, and like the burst state, he regarded it as one of his trump cards. Originally, it was prepared for the Star Alliance, the Queen of Heaven, and those monsters in the western continent. In the sky, the tentacles that covered the sky and the sun rolled towards Li Enping's position fiercely, and there was a hurricane that was enough to tear steel and blew on Li Enping's face. The terrifying power spread in the space, and in the next moment, Li Enping's body would be hit by these tentacles, and then squeezed, shaken, and kneaded into a pile of broken garbage. But even so, Li Enping did not move at all. There was no change in the expression on his face. All, get out. Li Enping's original body did not understand, and the mind chi incarnation was like a black lightning, punching directly on a tentacle. The savage collision of strength and strength, but the mind chi incarnation won with an overwhelming advantage. With the fist as the center, a huge dent suddenly appeared in a radius of 10 meters. A few seconds later, the power of the tsunami will spread from here to the entire tentacle. The terrible power will destroy all the muscles, nerves, epidermis, and blood vessels of the tentacles, and then smash them hard to the ground like a skyscraper collapsing. But these results have not happened in this second. Because there are too many things to happen in this second. The incarnation of the mind energy did not just punch, but saw him shooting left and right, his body like black lightning, passing through one tentacle after another, but to outsiders. This all happened at the same time. It was as if dozens of black incarnations of the mind energy appeared at the same time, punching each tentacle at the same time. 1 second later, amidst the loud bang, all the tentacles made a series of shattering sounds. Blood burst out from their bodies like rain. The power displayed by the incarnation of the mind energy at this time has reached a terrifying value of 33, which is a terrifying power enough to destroy dozens of streets with one blow. But compared to power, what is more terrifying is his speed. Because the incarnation of mind energy is composed of mind energy between spirit and body. It is lighter and the air resistance is almost negligible. Watching the tentacles around all being blown away, carrying a body that is tens of kilometers long. Smashed towards the descent. Li Enping was not surprised at all. He stretched out a finger towards the meat mountain under his feet. Total destruction. At a speed that even Li Enping could not see clearly, the figure of the incarnation of mind energy disappeared and reappeared, already standing on the meat mountain. This speed has reached the effect of 36 points, which is a speed that Li Enping cannot see, cannot perceive, and even difficult to control. Because the body composed of mind energy, the entity, and virtual body are all between the user's thoughts. Because mind energy can be virtual, it can pass through matter like a probe, scanning hundreds or thousands of meters. It can also be a physical body, directly acting on the material world. So if necessary, the incarnation of mind energy can completely ignore air resistance and move only by relying on the virtual force field, so his movement does not bring a trace of wind. Aiming at the meat mountain that was constantly tumbling and falling under his feet, the incarnation of mind energy raised his fists high, and the mind energy in his body rose to a height of 3 or 4 meters like a black volcanic eruption. Suddenly, countless fists fell like meteors, and the high-speed moving after images appeared directly in the air, looking like thousands of fists hitting the meat mountain at the same time. Ola 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 ola. Each punch was millions of tons of force, and the penetration of each punch was enough to penetrate more than 10 kilometers of rock formations. Every second, hundreds of thousands of punches fell like raindrops. What's more terrifying is that when each punch fell and contacted the meat mountain, the void force field was directly activated, covering the terrible impact force in the surrounding area of dozens of kilometers. The entire meat mountain began to deform and tear at a speed visible to the naked eye. And the violent power radiated to the surroundings through the gray, followed by a terrible earthquake. It seems that every punch of the incarnation of mind energy will cause the whole earth to tremble. The earth is like a young girl, being ravaged again and again. If it weren't for the fact that the entire Dongyang was on Hui's body, if a similar attack had hit a certain continent directly, the natural disaster it caused would probably be 10 times more severe. Institutions, organizations, and countries around the world, all kinds of exclamations occurred. They stared at the data detected on the computer, their faces full of disbelief. It was simply a dozen magnitude 10 earthquakes. How many nuclear bombs did Daxia drop on Kyoto? Will Dongyang Island sink? Similar topics were constantly talked about. But for those with abilities, their focus was different. What's going on? What happened? What kind of ability is it? Because technology cannot detect the mind energy can only be seen by those who have the mind energy. That is, people above the first energy level can see it. So at this moment, those who are watching this battle through various scientific and technological means cannot see the existence of the mind energy incarnation. And it doesn't work even if they are too close. Hundreds of unmanned reconnaissance aircraft have been torn into pieces by the hurricane caused by the battle before they get close to Lianping. So in their eyes, after the tentacles fell to the ground, the entire meat mountain kept exploding with terrifying explosions, as if thousands of missiles were detonated at the same time, bombarding the entire meat mountain with blood and flesh. It was impossible to see how the attack happened. The ability that Lianping showed at this moment was something he had never had before. This is what shocked all observers. But at the scene, Lianping, watching the blood and flesh splattering under his feet and the meat mountain getting smaller and smaller, was still dissatisfied. With a loud shout, Lianping's body was like a meteor, rushing towards the meat mountain under his feet again with a thunderous force. The power of the incarnation and the body attacking at the same time far exceeded the concept of 1+1. The violent room source, the flesh and blood that was 10 meters deep were all shattered into powder in an instant, and then drifted into the sky and disappeared. Kyoto has completely become a forbidden zone for life. The terrible hurricane, earthquake, and shockwave will wipe out all life except Lianping and Hui. But at this moment, a shrill scream resounded throughout the capital, and along with this scream, the entire earth shook violently. Lianping's heart moved, and although his hands did not stop, he still punched one after another, but he thought in his mind, did it succeed? Did he hurt him? Or, just as Lianping was thinking, huge pipes pierced the ground throughout Dongyang, like the gate of an underground passage, appearing on the surface. Then from these passages, all kinds of monsters ran out like 100 ghosts at night. Lions with bat wings and scorpion tails, giants with countless eyes, black horses with flames under their feet, and beasts covered with white bones. All kinds of strange monsters, as if they rushed out of hell, roared and ran towards Lianping, towards all life. The same scene happened in the whole Dongyang. This is the defense mechanism in the body of Gray. Countless creatures and monsters infected by his cells have awakened from the deepest hibernation and started to clean Gray's body from the surface of the body. They are like Gray's white blood cells, cleaning up all the pests that do not belong to his body. Obviously, Lianping and all Dongyang people and various animals belong to this category. This means that the awakening level of Gray's body has increased again. It also means that the end of mankind is not far away. To be continued. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Man at the Top of the Food Chain. Author, Xionglang Guo. Chapter 263. The entire Dongyang has been completely covered by a large number of monsters. Humans, as creatures that were originally at the top of the food chain, have become the food that monsters are scrambling to snatch at this moment. On the street, a giant horse with a black body and crimson flames on its forehooves is running at high speed. Wherever it passes, it leaves a long flame path and ignites all ignitable materials. No matter what car or building, it can't stop him from moving forward. It will either be directly knocked away by him or melted by the flames. One hoof stepped on a human man and directly crushed his lungs. Amid the screams of fear from the people around him, the monster giant horse opened its mouth and swallowed half of the man's head in one bite. The explosion covered most of the horse's face. In the sky, a dead bird more than 3 meters long, with only skeletons and rotten meat left, wandered beside a high-rise building. In the room of the high-rise building, a family of 3 hid behind the wall, trembling all over. The parents kept comforting their children on the left and right, but even they themselves were pale, with helplessness and confusion in their eyes. At this moment, a huge bone claw broke through the wall and grabbed the child's mother out. Amid the shrill screams of the family of 3, the mother's head was twisted off by another flying corpse bird with a bone claw and thrown into its mouth. More than a dozen corpse birds also flew from other directions. In the crazy fight, they completely dismembered the woman's body in a blink of an eye and swallowed a part of it into their stomachs. The next moment, the corpse birds, stimulated by the smell of blood, rushed to the building, broke through the outer walls, and drilled into people's rooms. The bloody smell was overwhelming, and desperate screams resounded throughout the sky. On the highway, there were congested or broken vehicles everywhere. People were either driving their cars recklessly or getting out of the car and running directly on their feet. But even they themselves didn't know. They had nowhere to escape now. In the distance of the highway, a huge sandworm emerged from the ground. Its body, like a hill, trembled, exposing its mouthparts like a crusher, and then it swallowed the humans and vehicles on the highway. The huge mouthparts covered the entire road surface. It looked like the highway led to the sandworm's mouth. The sandworm opened its mouth wide, as if eating noodles, and swallowed all the humans along the highway. Wherever it passed, all the humans were swallowed, and the meat and blood covered the entire mouthparts of the sandworm. In the square of the city, huge gorillas like King Kong were hunting. They were seen surrounding a huge artificial lake and constantly throwing dead humans into it. A King Kong grabbed a girl directly, pressed the girl's head with his thumb and index finger, and then twisted his wrist to twist the girl's head off. It opened its mouth excitedly and threw the girl's head into its mouth like a candy bean. Then it seemed to suck a drink. Cover the girl's severed head with its mouth and suck it continuously. The gorillas around were also doing similar actions, killing the prey in their hands. Then they threw their bodies into the huge artificial lake. A young man struggled hard and escaped from King Kong's hands. He ran away screaming, but before he could take a few steps, a giant hand fell from the sky and directly slapped his body into a pool of meat paste. The owner of the giant hand, a King Kong, picked up the meat paste with disgust and threw it into the artificial lake. On the other side, a large group of King Kongs suddenly became excited. I saw more than a dozen gorillas holding containers in their hands. There were all kinds of humans in the boxes. They were caught by King Kong like bugs in cans. Then they were thrown into the container rudely. Amid the excited roar, the King Kongs poured out the containers. At a height of more than 10 meters, most of the people who fell out of the containers were directly thrown to death. The few who survived were soon crushed and torn to pieces by the surrounding King Kongs. Then, amid the cheers of the King Kongs, a huge fire dragon descended from the sky. He roared, opened his mouth wide towards the artificial lake, and a large mouthful of white flames gushed out, directly heating the entire lake water. Countless corpses floated up from the bottom of the lake, and a human hot pot officially began amid the cheers of the monsters. The dead are dancing, and hell is singing. Similar scenes were staged throughout the land of Dongyang. All the humans who saw this through the screen were either terrified or angry. The monster army in front of them, both in number and strength, had completely exceeded their imagination. In the command room of the Halong aircraft carrier, the huge screen was playing the scene sent by the unmanned reconnaissance aircraft hundreds of kilometers away. A broken city, a rampaging monster army, and a crowd like buffet food. This is what everyone present can see. Suddenly the camera shook, and a huge dead bird head appeared in the camera. The next moment, the entire screen was mired in a snowflake, and the last thing that could be seen was the completely rotten mouth of the dead bird. Yang Guang looked at the screen with a serious face and asked Li Shan beside him, "Where are the other reconnaissance planes? Turn their cameras over." No more compared with Yang Guang's calmness, Li Shan was much more unbearable. He shook his head with a pale face. "All the reconnaissance planes have been destroyed. The one just now was the last one." Yang Guang frowned deeply. "Turn up the satellite images sent from the headquarters." The screen flashed, and the images taken by the spy satellite appeared in the sky above Mount Fuji. But apart from countless tentacles, exploding blood mist, cracked earth, and a huge blood hole, nothing could be seen. Li Enping and his mind incarnation had been chasing the meat mountain deep underground in the constant attack, and conventional detection methods could no longer monitor him. And since the first impact of Mount Fuji, Yang Guang has been unable to contact Li Enping. In that kind of attack, even the specially reinforced communication equipment would have been broken long ago. Damn it! Yang Guang slapped his palm on the operating table. He didn't understand what was going on at all. First, there was the inexplicable change in Kyoto, followed by one powerful enemy after another, and finally those monsters that suddenly appeared. What's going on with all this? I don't know how the adults are. Yang Guang didn't know the answer. The only thing he knew was that the entire Daxia, as well as the Ice Castle and the southern countries, all the countries on the East continent were now on full alert and entered the first level of combat readiness. All the main combatants of the Great Xia Dragon Bird were dispatched, ready to meet all kinds of attacks at any time. Yang Guang and the aircraft carrier fleet stayed above the East China Sea, ready to pick up Li Enping at any time. At this moment, there was a burst of noise on the deck. Yang Guang looked through the glass and saw people coming out of a dark portal one after another. Although the monster army caused great damage to Dongyang, they were no different from ordinary small animals in front of Li Enping. They couldn't even get close to Li Enping, and were directly shaken into powder by the strong winds hit by him and the incarnation of mind energy. However, Li Enping's body had returned to its original state at this time. With the complete end of the burst state, Li Enping's physical fitness returned to 29.9. The main force of the attack now is completely undertaken by the incarnation of mind energy. However, under the continuous attacks of the incarnation of mind energy and Li Enping's body before, the pink meat mountain has turned into a sea of blood, and the flesh and blood hundreds of meters deep were directly shattered, leaving a huge meat hole on the surface. Now, every attack of the mind chi incarnation will cause great trauma to Hui's core. However, as Hui's awakening degree increases, his regeneration speed increases, and Li Enping's burst state ends. As one increases, the other decreases, and Li Enping's destruction speed decreases again and again. If this continues, I am afraid that Li Enping will not be able to destroy the core even after Hui wakes up completely. He frowned, and the mind chi incarnation stopped attacking. Then his body became weak, and he had drilled into the meat mountain like a ghost, sinking continuously to the bottom of the core. Li Enping looked up and saw that the tentacles that were previously blasted had grown out again, and changed their shapes. They all became more than 10 meters thick, 10 times thinner than before, and the speed was much faster. The tips of the tentacles kept secreting purple poisonous gas and venom. Obviously, these are all evolutions made to adapt to Li Enping's speed. Looking at the countless tentacles rising into the sky and sweeping towards him, Li Enping smiled coldly. He never thought that he would be forced to this point when he came to Dongyang this time. Li Enping's uniform had been blown into pieces, but because of the atmospheric armor, his body looked like he was wearing a white combat uniform. The white combat uniform, under Li Enping's control, slowly revealed a hole on Li Enping's chest. A crystal clear gem drilled out from it and appeared in Li Enping's palm. The only thing he carried with him was this one, which he had been intentionally protecting with the void force field, and the solidity of the gem itself, which was the only intact thing among the things he carried. The gift from the Star Alliance, the Spirit Gem. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, SpecialAbilities. Chapter 264. The Spirit Gem allows the user to possess the fifth level of power of the Queen of Heaven within 12 hours. A tool that can turn mortals into gods. Li Anping threw the spiritual gem into his mouth, and felt that the extremely strong spiritual gem instantly turned into streams of cool air after entering his mouth. A unique power slowly flowed through Li Anping's body. An inexplicable brilliance emerged from Li Anping's eyes. The whole world seems to have changed. Li Anping has never seen the world so clearly as he does now. Consciousness scanned hundreds of kilometers around it in an instant. With the change of attention, every atom, every molecule, various rays in the air, as well as magnetic fields, electric fields, and even radiation of various energies. All of this was displayed so clearly before Li Anping's eyes that he felt like his eyes could see through everything. Is this the world in the eyes of the Queen? Even though countless tentacles were close at hand, even though the fatal threat was in front of him, there was still no confusion in Li Anping's eyes, let alone the slightest bit of panic. There was only curiosity in his eyes. At this moment, Li Anping was like a newborn baby, looking at the whole world with curious eyes. His right hand gathers the power of the void force field, and his left hand is the spiritual force field belonging to the Queen of Heaven. Li Anping didn't know how the Queen used her abilities, but he knew that he could do it himself. I saw Li Anping stretched out his palm and gently brushed the previous air. Wherever he passed, layers of virtual force fields wrapped the air in front of him, with the help of the mental force field. Things that were originally difficult to detect with the naked eye were scanned by mental power, and now appeared in Li Anping's mind at a glance. Molecules, atoms, nuclei, protons, neutron, electron, oxygen, nitrogen, radon, helium, neon, argon, krypton, xenon in the air. All of this seemed to be vivid in his mind, and Li Anping could even wrap them with his own virtual force field, and then start to move. Collision, convergence, and suddenly, incredible power rose from Li Anping's palm. A little light shines from the ground, and the next moment, it lights up the entire sky. Amastrian Federation. City in the sky. All 5 ability users of the imaginary number agency were present, or in other words, through high-definition projection and the internet, the images and sounds of the 5 ability users of the imaginary number agency were all gathered into the conference room of the Sky City. On the round table in the conference room, the only empty seat belonged to Jane. The one at the head was a man wearing a monocle and his snow-white hair was meticulously combed. Wearing a straight female outfit, she is the leader of the imaginary number agency. She is over 70 years old, but her behavior is still notoriously tough. One of the 5th level ability users of the imaginary number agency, Judy M. She said, "I think everyone knows what this emergency meeting is about. Since the Butcher appeared, a series of huge changes have taken place in the Eastern world. The changes in Dongyang this time are obviously inseparable from him. A blond man, wearing a tuxedo and gold-rimmed glasses. The young man who looked like an ancient aristocrat said, 'Do you doubt that what the Queen of Heaven said is true? According to satellite images, large-scale unknown creatures have appeared throughout Dongyang. They are indeed similar to human beings and monsters. This man's name is Ilstad, and it was he who participated in the last meeting held by the Queen. He and Judy were the only 2 people present in person at this meeting.' Regarding what Ilstad said, Judy M. was non-committal. There is no definite evidence yet to determine whether the strange incident has anything to do with Li Anping. But the power displayed by Li Anping at this moment has seriously threatened the balance of the world and the safety of every citizen in the Federation. The President has spoken to me personally, and the Commonwealth cannot tolerate the continued amplification of this uncontrolled threat. Are you going to start a war? A middle-aged man dressed like jeans chuckled. As he spoke, he picked up the wine bottle in his hand and took a sip. Li Anping is only one person after all. Although he is very capable, but also single. In comparison, I think the Queen's side is more difficult. The number of level 5 ability users in the Star Alliance is still a mystery. What exactly is Shang Jinhai's ability is, the Star Alliance has kept it secret until now, and we don't know. No, I think Li Anping is the biggest threat, Lestat said. Although the Star Alliance is powerful, its strength is at most comparable to ours, but Li Anping is different. In the past year, everyone has seen the increase in his power. Right? If in the next year, as long as his growth rate remains above 30%, I am afraid we will not even have a chance to fight with him in the future. Just as the senior officials of the Imaginary Number Agency were arguing about Li Anping's attitude, a staff member suddenly broke in. As soon as he came in, he felt two huge pressures on his body, making it difficult for him to move even an inch. It seemed that the next second bell, he will die a violent death. However, the pressure came and went quickly. Judy glanced at the staff, frowned and said, "Didn't I tell you that we are in a meeting? If there is anything, we will talk about it after the meeting." "Sir, a new situation has occurred in Dongyang," the staff said in a panic. Judy asked, "What's going on?" Kyoto, a high-energy reaction has occurred. According to the test, a large-scale nuclear fusion reaction and explosion has occurred. When this sentence was finished, the faces of the 5 people present had changed at the same time, and the terrible pressure came from Judy and Lestat again. The staff member could only tremble and continue. According to the calculation of the working group, its explosion power is equivalent to the explosion of a 50-million-ton hydrogen bomb. At this moment, the entire conference room was silent. The terrible explosion occurred with Li Anping as the center. The shock wave instantly crushed the flesh and blood around, and the high temperature of more than 350 million degrees melted everything in front of it. A huge mushroom cloud rose into the sky, and everything within a radius of hundreds of kilometers, whether on the ground or underground, turned to ashes in an instant. All the monsters were also directly melted by the flames. The air turned into a raging storm, and the hurricane swept across most of Dongyang Island. The terrifying mushroom fire cloud was tens of kilometers high, and even Yang Guan could see it. The electromagnetic disturbance caused by the thermonuclear reaction swept across the entire planet in an instant. Within 3,000 kilometers, all aircraft, missiles, radars, and communication equipment were affected. Countless aircraft temporarily lost contact, and Yang Guang's aircraft carrier formation was the first to bear the brunt. The entire electronic system was damaged on a large scale, the radar could not be operated, and the communication was interrupted. Such a terrible explosion, but Li Anping, who was at the center of the explosion, was unharmed. Not only was he unharmed, but the area within 1 meter around him was like a calm harbor at the same time. Just 1 meter away, infinite light, heat, and shock waves were constantly sweeping back and forth. Shock waves are the lateral movement of gases. Temperature is the intensity of molecular thermal motion. Li Anping's void force field can be operated at the atomic level with the help of the Queen's spiritual force field. Whether it is high temperature or shock waves approaching him, the rioting molecules are instantly calmed down and return to calm. Within 1 meter around him, it is like the eye of a storm, even calmer than anywhere else on this planet. Whether it is temperature or airflow, there is no ripple. Above Li Anping's head, all the tentacles and flesh had disappeared, and the previous crisis had been completely resolved. But under Li Anping's feet, within a radius of hundreds of kilometers, the pink meat mountain was only vaporized to a depth of a few kilometers. The gray under his feet, even if it was only the core part, was as large as a mountain range. Such a violent explosion was just a cut for him. From that moment on, the difference in strength caused by the size was as obvious as that between the gray and Li Anping. At this time, the gray had already shown the word huge to the extreme. The strength generated by his huge body made Li Anping's series of attacks unable to take him down. What's more troublesome is that as the explosion slowly stopped and the high temperature and heat gradually disappeared, the surface of the meat mountain has begun to wriggle again, and layers of dead skin and dead meat have been replaced. The speed of Gray's regeneration seems to have become faster. However, Li Anping didn't put his hope on this attack. His mind received the information from the incarnation of the mind. His eyes seemed to have seen through layers of space and came to the lowest level of the meat mountain. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiong Go. Chapter 265. All countries are constantly stimulated by the events in Dongyang. But if their performance before was just shock, nervousness, worry and so on. When Dongyang's monster army appeared, they felt out of control, and when the explosion of 50 million equivalents occurred, all the country's top officials felt fear. Amist Federation, in the Sky City. Reports one after another about Dongyang monsters and assessment reports on the Kyoto explosion were sent to Judy M and other 5th level ability users as quickly as possible. It's like an army that ran out of hell looking at the satellite pictures in his hand. The person speaking was a strong man wearing a military uniform, with a shaved head and explosive muscles all over his body. It looks like a Terminator. The man is called the Giant Shield. He is the number 1 melee combatant of the Imaginary Number Agency and the number 1 militant person in the Imaginary Number Agency. Judy M said, "The President needs us to assess the threat of these monsters in order to make targeted arrangements." The middle-aged man in cowboy clothes said casually while drinking, "What is there to evaluate? Aren't the evaluation reports of those experts already written? Conventional weapons are ineffective, and those with abilities below level 4 cannot resist. If these ghosts come, the Federation is absolutely an unprecedented disaster." The woman with brilliant blonde hair and an aristocratic temperament shrugged her shoulders and said, "The whole of Dongyang has become a world of monsters, so Li Anping is saving the world." Lestat on the side said, "Vivian, we are still not sure whether all these changes were caused by Li Anping and Daxia. A hydrogen bomb explosion with an equivalent of more than 50 million tons can have such power. Nuclear weapons. In the eastern continent, it's either Ice Castle or Daxia." Vivian said sarcastically, "So you suspect that Daxia dropped the hydrogen bomb himself and killed Li Anping?" Lestat spread his hands. Li Anping once had the experience of being in the center of a nuclear explosion in Bayou and still not dying. With the regeneration ability he has shown now, I have no doubt that he can withstand this hydrogen bomb attack. Even this attack may have been his own order." Judeng frowned and said, "But satellites and radars did not scan any carrier devices. Or traces of intercontinental missiles. How did that hydrogen bomb appear in Kyoto, and how did it explode?" Lestat said, "Many ability users can do this kind of thing. For example, Emma, the newly emerged 5th level ability user in Daxia, can do this with her space teleportation ability. And she has already appeared in Kyoto beforehand. However, this hydrogen bomb was probably transported by her." The middle-aged man in cowboy clothes said, "Even if it is Li Anping's order, it is the hydrogen bomb dropped by Daxia. So what? Dongyang has been completely occupied. We should not act rashly without sufficient evidence." Lestat stood up and said with a chuckle, "Don't you understand? This will be a change of the times. The incident in Dongyang is like a fuse that will completely break the balance of the entire Eastern and Western worlds. In the past 200 years, the major powers in the Western continent, whether it is in terms of military strength or the level of ability users, they are all far ahead of the Eastern continent. Even all the countries in the Eastern continent have a history of being colonized by us. But because of the emergence of nuclear weapons and the emergence of level 5 ability users, the Star Alliance was added to balance it. There is also an economic crisis, an energy crisis. Due to various reasons such as new energy technology, our power has withdrawn from the Eastern world. But there is no doubt that there is an opportunity to make a comeback. Because of Li Anping, A large number of 5th level ability users in the entire eastern continent died from internal friction. The Star Alliance and Li Enping fought against each other and even withdrew most of their forces from the eastern continent. The Codex Kingdom was too busy cleaning up the domestic monsters to take care of itself, and Tyrell was already in decline, so there was nothing to worry about. And Li Enping, the butcher, has now given us the best excuse. The giant shield laughed, and a ferocious smile appeared on his ferocious face. He touched his bald head and said, "You mean, the world war is about to start again?" No, although the Eastern world is as weak as ever before, Li Enping is very powerful. As long as he is around, it is impossible to start a full-scale war at this point. Lestat gave a sneer, but although Li Enping is powerful, he is also very weak. With pure strength and speed, no matter how strong he is, we have countless ways to deal with him, right? Looking at the other 4 level 5 ability users present, Lestat said, "Everyone, once Li Enping dies, the eastern continent will fall into chaos. You should all be able to foresee it, right? I suggest that the Federation make arrangements early to get the most benefit in the future." Looking at the people who were deep in thought, Judy Eno coughed and said calmly, "I will report the suggestions of the 4 to His Excellency the President. However, the global situation is tense now, so please keep in touch with the headquarters at any time. The trouble will be followed up. Keep your device and communicator with you at all times. Don't wander around." After saying this, she glared at the giant shield and the man in cowboy clothes. They both smiled and cut off the network. At the same time, similar emergency meetings were held in countries around the world. Because the time was too short and a series of changes occurred in Dongyang too quickly, most of these meetings had no results. But they all showed hostility towards Li Enping and Daxia to a greater or lesser extent. No one could sit back and watch a powerful country rise like this. No one could ignore the threat posed by Li Enping. In addition, Daxia's military action against Dongyang caused great disgust among all Western countries. In the civilian world, before dawn the next day, various news reports had appeared on the internet, television, and other major media. There were reports about Daxia's invasion of Dongyang, dropping hydrogen bombs in Kyoto, and even testing biological and chemical weapons in Dongyang. Various true or false news flooded the internet. Li Enping's name was mentioned countless times, and this dictator and butcher of the East continent was drowned in the saliva of countless netizens. Of course, because of the Western world's control of intelligence, most ordinary civilians did not even know that Li Enping was a capable person, let alone Li Enping's combat effectiveness. Only a few high-level people or well-informed people really knew about Li Enping's situation. Therefore, many groups jointly wrote to the government, asking them to send troops to help Dongyang repel Daxia, and preferably kill Li Enping to maintain world peace. The government will certainly not be so careless, but it will not stop the activities of these civil groups. Various articles criticizing Daxia, and Li Enping's articles are of course endless. After that, even in the Federation and the Code, a series of Daxia people were maliciously attacked and sexually assaulted by local residents. There are also many Daxia people working and studying in the Western continent who have been fired for no reason, sexually harassed, deliberately made things difficult, and some shops opened by Daxia people have been robbed, and so on. A series of racial discrimination incidents. Originally, the status of Daxia people in the Western world is lower than that of local people, and racial discrimination is commonplace. This Dongyang incident has magnified this contradiction infinitely. But what happened next in Dongyang once again changed the attitude of Western high-level officials. At this moment, Li Enping did not know the changes in the Western world, and he was not interested in knowing. In his mind, there was only one goal from beginning to end, which was to kill Hui. Li Enping's body quickly floated towards the meat mountain under his feet. After a few seconds, he had fallen to the surface of the meat mountain. The high temperature evaporated all the blood and water. The meat mountain under Li Anping's feet kept wriggling, replacing layers of dead meat with newly generated living meat. Hundreds of kilometers deep under Li Anping's feet, the incarnation of mind energy stopped here and showed its entity. I saw red blood wrapped around the incarnation of mind energy, which seemed to be in a blood vessel. Around the core of the meat mountain, there were countless such blood vessels and nerves connected to control the whole body of Gray. You can see that various energies are transported to the top of the head of the incarnation of mind energy, the core of Gray. The top of the head of the incarnation of mind energy is the gray-pink core, which stores all his subjective consciousness and controls the whole body of Gray. So far, Li Anping has been trying to kill the opponent before Gray wakes up by destroying the core. But after a series of attacks, the effect on Gray is minimal, because Gray is too huge. Even if it is just the core part, it is as big as a mountain, and as the core of Hui, its solidity is beyond imagination. Even the big explosion just now can only cut off the depth of hundreds of kilometers and thousands of meters of the meat mountain. Compared with its size, it is negligible. What's more troublesome is that after each attack of Li Anping, Hui's body will regenerate quickly, and even with the degree of Hui's awakening, the regeneration speed will become faster and faster. Maybe if Li Anping is given enough time, he can slowly destroy the core under his feet within the 12 hours of the spirit gem, but now there is obviously not so much time. The vibration amplitude of the whole Dongyang is getting bigger and bigger, various monsters emerge in an endless stream, and countless lands rise or sink. Several cities turned into a pile of wreckage in the ups and downs of Hui's breath. There is not much time left for Li Anping. So he decided to change a method. The incarnation of mind energy raised his hands and held the pink core above his head. Because of the huge size difference, it looks like an ant trying to move a car. But in the next moment, some changes seemed to occur in the air. Countless atoms and molecules collided with each other, and a powerful force rose from under the feet of the incarnation of mind energy. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Man at the Top of the Food Chain. Author, Xiong Lango. Chapter 266. Under the feet of the incarnation of mind energy, the atoms with smaller mass in the space, under the high pressure of the void force field, underwent mutual aggregation of nuclei, and thus generated heavier nuclei. The change of nuclei is accompanied by the release of energy, which contains huge energy. The change from lighter nuclei to heavier nuclei is nuclear fusion. For example, the luminescence and heat of the sun is a kind of nuclear fusion. Nuclear energy is also the strongest power that humans can achieve at present. And now, the most violent nuclear fusion reaction ever is taking place under the feet of the incarnation of mind energy. With a stronger void force field and physical fitness than the main body, plus Li Anping's deliberate indulgence, this nuclear fusion reaction is countless times more powerful than the one caused by Li Anping's main body before. The endless power in the nucleus is transformed, and the terrifying tail flame is ejected towards the feet of the incarnation of mind energy, turning into an upward driving force. This is equivalent to amplifying Li Anping's own power by thousands and tens of thousands of times through the nuclear fusion reaction, becoming an almost irresistible brute force. Such a huge driving force, coupled with the fact that the incarnation of the mind energy was holding the core of the gray with both hands, would only make the incarnation of the mind energy like a steel needle, deeply piercing into the core of the gray. However, because of the void force field, the incarnation of the mind energy seemed to have only two hands supporting it, but the fully expanded void force field directly expanded the area of the force to dozens of square kilometers. Like a pair of palms, he wanted to push the core of the gray out. Hundreds of kilometers above the incarnation of the mind energy, Li Anping stood still, but he suddenly felt a terrible pressure on his body. The bones of his hands broke first, and then blood flowed from his ears. Eyes. He felt as if he was going to be crushed at any time and anywhere. It turned out that after the damage suffered by the incarnation of the mind energy, his body would also suffer the same damage. At this time, the incarnation of the mind energy wanted to push the entire core of the Grey upwards, and the nuclear power, thousands and tens of thousands of times greater than the power of the body, was transmitted to the core through his body. It seemed that he would be crushed into powder in the next moment. If it was Li Anping's real body that did this, he would have turned into a pile of meat patties. However, this was the first time that the incarnation of the mind energy was hurt, and it also made Li Anping know that the incarnation of the mind energy would not be really hurt, but the damage he suffered would be transferred to Li Anping in the same proportion. Fortunately, the strength of the incarnation of the mind energy far exceeded Li Anping's physical body, so the transferred damage was not fatal enough. At the end of the outbreak, Li Anping left 10,000 souls for emergency. It was to face this kind of emergency. Under the nourishment of soul energy, the bones of Li Anping's hands kept healing and breaking. On the one hand, the incarnation of the mind energy was under great pressure, constantly transferring the damage to Li Anping in proportion, and the soul power kept healing Li Anping's injuries. With a wow, Li Anping felt a pain in his chest and vomited a large mouthful of blood. Just now, he broke several ribs again, and his internal organs were bleeding directly. The incarnation of the mind energy underground also bent his arms, and the whole person almost curled up into a ball. But there was no fear in Li Anping's eyes. He had long been accustomed to being injured, accustomed to various fatal injuries on his body. His head had been blown up, his body had been torn apart, and his heart had been crushed. In comparison, this injury was nothing, and now the severe pain from being pressed all over his body was nothing. Who? With a loud shout, Li Anping stood up suddenly. And hundreds of kilometers below, the incarnation of mind energy also followed this loud shout, straightened his back again, and slowly pushed the entire core upwards. Boom boom boom. The earth was shaking continuously, except for the surface that was blown up by Li Anping, exposing the core. The top of the other core meat mountains was still covered with a large number of rock layers, and now, these rocks and soil were under a huge driving force. Constantly vibrating and rolling, rising into the sky with the entire meat mountain core. Li Anping, who was at the top of the core, was still standing at this time, but he was almost covered in blood. Blood kept gushing out of his mouth, ears, nose, and eyes under the pressure of huge force. But his eyes were fixed on the huge meat mountain under his feet, and his feet did not move at all, as firm as a stone statue standing for thousands of years. Only the thick blood was squeezed out of his body and gathered under his feet, forming a huge pool of blood. With almost incredible power, accompanied by the sound of the earth shaking, countless blood vessels, nerves, and muscle fibers were torn around the gray core. And the huge meat mountain rose upward at an increasingly faster speed. Code Country, Canonization Province, Satellite Observation Center. A staff member just made a cup of coffee, took a sip, and made a satisfied sound. His hands were tapping on the keyboard, constantly observing the various values displayed on the screen. Beside him, a colleague yawned and complained, "What on earth is going on with the higher UPS? I made an appointment with Lisa after get off work, but they asked me to stay to observe satellite images." Another person laughed and said, "Stop complaining. I heard that there was a fight in the East Continent, and nuclear weapons were used. The Knights are short of manpower and need our help. Are there not enough spy satellites? When did they need our help? At most, we can measure the environment and terrain. Can those yellow monkeys fight and destroy the entire Dongyang Island? Speaking of Dongyang, you really should go there to play. The girls there, wow, really." Before the man finished speaking, he heard a puff, and his colleague sprayed all the coffee in his mouth on the screen, looking at the display screen as if he had seen a ghost. "What's wrong with you? Look, if it's my illusion," the man murmured. "Why is the altitude in the Kyoto area rising? Damn. Is there something wrong with the instrument? In the Sky City of the Amist Federation, a similar situation is happening. The meat mountain, as big as a mountain, is rising and flying into the sky under the push of Li Enping. From the visual effect, it's almost like a mountain is lifted up and flying into the sky. And the size of that mountain is far above the Sky City. Judy Eno looked at the images from the satellite with a grim face, watching the land that is almost larger than Mount Fuji, rising rapidly into the sky. Incredibly, he said, what on earth is going on? Just then, a staff member shouted, I found him. The camera on the big screen changed and turned directly to the highest point of the meat mountain. A figure covered in blood was standing there motionless. Judy was surprised and said, it's Li Enping. It's him. Is he dead? Can anyone tell me what he is doing there? What is going on? Why is a mountain flying up? Just then, the head on the screen turned. He seemed to have noticed the satellite's observation and turned his neck directly in the direction of the satellite lens. His eyes seemed to be able to see everyone on the screen, giving people a creepy feeling. Judy was surprised and said, what's going on? Did he notice us? A staff member said flatly, it's impossible. The satellite is 800 kilometers away from him. He can't notice it. But at this moment, the screen suddenly twisted, and then flashed several times, and it turned completely black, completely losing Li Enping's trace and all the scenes. Judy said angrily, what's going on? A subordinate asked in confusion, I don't know. There has been a large-scale magnetic field change where the satellite is located. We have temporarily lost contact with the satellite. Damn it! Fix it for me. The same situation was played out by high-level officials in countries around the world. Because Li Enping used atomic-level manipulation of the void force field to achieve electromagnetic interference, they almost lost contact with the spy satellite over Kyoto at the same time. On Li Enping's side, the core the size of the entire mountain range was still accelerating upward, as if it was about to break through the sky. But Hui obviously would not allow Li Enping to do this. A huge roar came from the depths of the core, and countless tentacles from the depths of the earth grabbed the core in the sky, and in the distant sky, dragons, birds, and all kinds of incredible monsters were flying towards the core. Obviously, their purpose was to stop Li Enping. Looking at these threats, Li Enping smiled, raised his hands again, and rushed towards the air above his head was swept away. A ray of light flashed from the top of Li Enping's head. In the microscopic world, there are different numbers of electrons around each atom. When electrons are stimulated by photons and jump from high energy levels to low energy levels, they will radiate the same light as photons. This is the principle of laser. What Li Enping did was to use the virtual force field as the first force and the photons of sunlight as the first light. While vibrating the molecules were stimulated and emitted new photons. The photons drive the next molecule to release its energy in the form of a beam of the same wavelength, and this energy then acts on another identical molecule, causing it to release energy as well. The next step is a series of avalanche-like stimulating effects, which completely dissipate the energy of the initially excited molecules. The whole body is transformed into a very strong photon, and the stronger the initial force, the stronger the laser produced by the vibrating material. Through this series of avalanche-like reactions, even a tiny force can produce a laser, and how powerful is Li Enping's void force field? In addition, he controls the mirror surface created by the air reflecting light. The laser cannon was born from Li Enping's hands. The fifth energy level ability of the Queen of Heaven may not give anyone the explosive strength improvement that Li Enping has. However, Li Enping, relying on the terrifying power of his body, the terrible application of the void force field, and a brain that can run like a supercomputer, has a fifth level mental force field. As he becomes more and more proficient in using it, his power is becoming more and more powerful. Incredible. He felt that he was almost omnipotent. Li Anping named this state the state of God. At least in these 12 hours. I am invincible. The next moment, a light that was bright enough to make the world pale in comparison lit up in Li Anping's palm, and even the sun in the sky dimmed. This is because when the light is extremely bright, everything around gives people the illusion of darkness in comparison. The next second, the laser shot directly from Li Anping's hands, as if there was only this light left in the sky. And how fast is the speed of light? Those giant dragons, corpse birds, bats, and all kinds of strange monsters flying in the sky did not even have a chance to dodge, and were directly melted and evaporated by the laser beam. The terrifying laser beam was like a scavenger, a sharp sword of light. It surrounded Li Anping in a few seconds, sweeping thousands of kilometers in radius, and all the monsters approaching in the sky were instantly swept away. And below the meat mountain, the incarnation of mind energy used the same method to cut off countless attacking tentacles. At this moment, almost all humans in the entire East continent could feel that two rays of light seemed to flash in the sky. And the core as huge as the entire mountain range was still rising towards the sky at an increasingly faster speed, and no creature could stop it. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, SpecialAbilities. Chapter 267. On this day, almost half of the people in the eastern world saw the second sun in the sky. As the entire core meat mountain continued to rise, the high temperature ignited the entire core because of the nuclear fusion controlled by Li Anping. Endless flesh and blood became fuel, turning the entire mountain-sized meat mountain into a huge fireball. Burning unknown substances continued to fall off from the core and fall to the ground, creating a piece of fire rain over Dongyang. What is even more shocking is that with the rise of this little sun, Dongyang seemed to have arrived in the summer of July. The burning core emitted endless light and heat, causing the temperature of the entire Dongyang to continue to rise. Although the spy satellites of various countries over Dongyang lost contact at the same time, they still learned about the second sun in the sky through various means. Videos about the second sun in the sky on the internet are also spreading wildly. Not only in the East continent, but even in the West continent, although it has been banned by the top leaders of various countries, it still cannot stop people's curiosity. It's just that this is regarded as some kind of special astronomical phenomenon. Ordinary people have no idea how this second sun was born. Although the top leaders of countries around the world do not know the principle of the birth of the second sun in the sky, just knowing that this thing was done by Li Anping is enough to make them look ugly. Over Dongyang, the outer space more than 600 kilometers away from the ground. The dark void has become the background of the world. At this time, Li Anping is still standing at the highest point of the meat mountain. The difference is that his body is completely surrounded by flames, but because of the absolute control of the void force field over the surrounding molecules, his body will not be in high temperature burning. However, as the core gradually rises, until now it has come to the outer space, the momentum of the flame has gradually decreased due to the gradual disappearance of oxygen, and the only thing left is to burn the flesh and blood of the core as fuel. However, the core of the ash has a high flame resistance. In the process of burning, it also instinctively changes its structure to resist high temperature. Now there is less and less air. If it simply burns these flesh and blood, it will probably not take long for the flame to stop burning completely. But even so, the meat mountain of the entire core has been completely burned by 1/3, and its size has shrunk a lot. Not only the flames, as the incarnation of the mind energy continues to accelerate, the entire core is rising faster and faster, especially now that it has reached outer space. It has broken through the second cosmic speed and is moving towards the third cosmic speed. In this way, even if Li Anping stops working, the entire core will break free from the shackles of the sun's gravity, eventually break away from the solar system, and enter the outer universe. Without the connection to the core, the entire Dongyang land has stopped shaking, just like a brain-dead vegetative person, and Huey's entire body has fallen into a deep sleep again. Earthquakes, mountain torrents, mudslides, and other natural disasters gradually stopped. Only many monsters that have lost control are left, and they begin to act according to their instincts, turning the entire Dongyang into a paradise for monsters. However, it is obvious that Hui's core part has not fallen into a deep sleep again. Just as Li Anping's body gradually reached its limit and there was little soul left for self-healing, the nuclear fusion reaction under the feet of the mind energy incarnation gradually stopped because of the speed of the entire core. Finally, at this moment, it reached the third cosmic speed, began to break away from the sun's gravity, and flew towards the distant outer space. So far, Li Anping's mission has been completed for the most part. Even if the Grey cannot be eliminated next, the entire human world is temporarily safe. Just as Li Anping breathed a sigh of relief, his whole body was no longer oppressed by the huge force, and with the help of the soul power, he kept healing at a high speed, and endless malice suddenly covered his body. Li Anping's face changed, and his feet exerted force, large pieces of flesh and blood suddenly burst, and his whole body had left the core at an astonishing speed. With the help of the void force field, the whole body turned several times in a row and flew towards the ground. I saw that the place where he was standing was completely covered by a terrible tentacle. I saw that the entire core meat mountain, in a series of changes, stretched out thick tentacles from the body. These tentacles, whether in terms of strength, speed, or material, were incomparable to what Li Anping had encountered on the ground before. What is even more frightening is that with the appearance of these tentacles, a crack of more than 100 kilometers long gradually appeared on the surface of the core, and then the crack gradually opened, revealing a huge eye. The eye of more than 100 kilometers long just stared at Li Anping, which contained endless resentment, anger, hatred, and madness. The whole meat mountain was like a huge eyeball, floating in the outer space. The eyes contained some kind of terrible will, just seeing it was enough to make people crazy. At this moment, Hui finally woke up completely. A violent consciousness swept across thousands of kilometers in an instant, and then the sound of countless insects roared in Li Anping's heart. The sound sounded illogical and unsystematic, and it was completely impossible to hear that it was a language. But Li Anping understood it. Hey, look at you now, you have lost your body, lost your power, and live in the body of a reptile. What a poor guy. But don't worry, I will make you a part of my body and experience the power of our clan again. Li Anping could hear and understand what the other party said, but he didn't know how to speak this language or how to answer. In fact, he was not interested in answering. Under the acceleration of the void force field, he kept moving away from the core of Hui, and it seemed that he had no intention of fighting with Hui. Do you want to escape? As the angry consciousness vibrated in the space, the huge tentacles grabbed Li Anping's body, just like slapping a mosquito to death. A black shadow flashed, and the incarnation of the mind appeared behind Li Anping. The dazzling light lit up again, and a terrifying laser had cut the tentacles in half. Roar! Seeing that his attack did not work, Hui became even more angry. The tentacles all over his body were like dancing eyes, constantly twisting his body. On the surface of his core, with waves of trembling, more than a dozen huge gun muzzles of tens of meters appeared. I don't know how Hui did it. In outer space, countless hydrogen ions from the sun were constantly heated, and in an instant, they exceeded millions of degrees and became plasma. Then, these ionized hydrogens were concentrated at the muzzle like huge balls of light, aiming at Li Anping's body. The temperature of the plasma itself is millions, enough to evaporate any substance instantly. This is the plasma cannon, or the plasma cannon, a weapon that has not been developed in the whole world, but it was easily completed by Hui with his own. Under the scanning of the mental force field, Li Anping, who found the plasma cannon, also changed his expression. Such a plasma cannon is probably enough to destroy a human city with one shot. However, Li Anping did not intend to send Hui out of the solar system so easily. He spent so much effort, but he did not intend to let the other party go so easily. His disgust and hatred for Hui were like the instinct of his body, no less than the other party's hatred for him. Li Anping, who felt that the distance was almost right, sneered and stretched out his right palm in the direction of Hui. The incarnation of the mind behind him made the same move and also aimed his palm at Hui. Through the effect of the void force field, the surrounding hydrogen ions were constantly accelerated, producing a large number of positrons, which were constantly generated in front of Li Anping's palm like an invisible force. In front of the palm of the incarnation of the mind, countless electrons moved at high speed to generate a magnetic field, and the electromagnetic force constantly gathered and constrained the positrons in Li Anping's palm. This is the positron cannon, the ultimate weapon based on the annihilation of positrons and electrons. Because they are in outer space, the air around them is very thin, and the colorless positrons can only produce a faint light when they hit the air. But in this faint light, Hui has already felt a huge sense of threat. The next moment, as more than a dozen plasmas were emitted from the muzzle of the Hui body, the positrons in Li Anping's hand also turned into a straight line under the action of electromagnetic force and shot towards the core of Hui. Along the way, the positrons kept hitting the air, forming a dim light column. So we saw the light and light colliding in the sky. The terrible destructive power seemed to make even the heaven and earth tremble. Originally, Li Anping wanted to wait until he was in the vacuum of the universe before using the positron cannon, so that he could inflict the greatest damage to Hui. However, time waits for no one, and Hui still woke up at the last moment. So even if the power of the positron cannon could not reach its maximum due to the influence of the air, he could only fire it in advance. In mid-air, the dim light of the positron cannon quickly annihilated the plasma group emitted by Hui, and then directly crossed a distance of several kilometers and completely penetrated Hui's core. Wherever the positron cannon passed, all matter dissipated in the air, and Hui's core continued to decompose and dissipate. The remaining turned into countless particles and drifted towards outer space. To be continued. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xianglang Guo. Chapter 268. The incarnation of the mind behind Li Anping slowly disappeared, and he himself fell faster and faster towards the ground. But his eyes were still looking at the original position of Hui. The annihilation reaction produced by positrons and electrons erupted with huge energy, causing a huge explosion in outer space, almost illuminating the entire sky. In the horrible explosion, the core of Hui had completely disappeared. But unlike the countless killings before, Li Anping did not feel the growth of soul power. Is Hui not dead, or, his entire body must be destroyed? Li Anping did not know which of the two possibilities was. If Hui's core was not completely destroyed, then his remaining fragments were also flying towards the outside of the solar system at the third cosmic speed, and I am afraid that Li Anping would never see it in this life. If his entire body was to be destroyed, it would be too troublesome. And there was no need. After all, Li Anping's current physical body had reached a bottleneck, and even if he absorbed Hui's soul power, it could not be effectively improved. Besides, after Hui's body lost its main consciousness, it had completely fallen into a deep sleep and became the original land. Thinking of this, Li Anping's body accelerated, and a black line was already flying towards Dongyang. After repelling Hui, there were more than 9 hours left in the state of God, and he still had a lot of things to do. In a large supermarket in a city in Dongyang. The supermarket was full of scattered goods and large pieces of collapsed walls. There were also many wires exposed outside the wall, and from time to time, a group of electric sparks burst out, making the lights of the entire supermarket flicker. A group of ragged, unkempt people, like refugees. Facing a large number of shelves full of food, they kept sweeping canned food, biscuits, and other foods from them into the shopping cart. Several men and women shouted, "Hurry up, those monsters are coming. Damn, it must be the end of the world." We have to grab more food. At this moment, a beast roar came from the supermarket gate. The Dongyang people, who were like refugees, were startled and immediately ran towards the back door with shouts and screams. Everyone's face showed a look of fear. But before they ran far with the shopping cart, they saw a black shadow flash. A cheetah with a dark body and a cluster of orchid flames burning on its head had blocked them. Ah! Amid screams, the refugees hurriedly turned around and ran, but they didn't know that a similar cheetah appeared behind them. The two cheetahs blocked them in the shelves one after the other, and kept roaring. Just when they looked desperate. When he thought he was going to be eaten by these monsters, a young man slowly walked out from behind the cheetah and said sincerely, "Don't be afraid, they have no ill intentions." The man who spoke was Takuchi Aoda. He touched the cheetah's head, and the latter showed an expression of enjoyment, and then slowly stepped back. Takuchi Aoda looked at the cautious eyes of several people. He smiled and said, "It's too dangerous to stay in the wild. I found a place where it is safer and will not attract powerful monsters. Do you want me to go with you?" Takuchi Aoda persuaded a few more words. Just when several people hesitated, Takuchi Aoda's face changed. He felt an incredible mental force sweeping through his body. He didn't have time to say a word, and turned around and ran quickly out of the supermarket. But as soon as his body moved, a thunderous explosion came from the sky outside the house. Then the whole supermarket suddenly shook, and the top of the supermarket was instantly shattered, revealing a large hole with a diameter of 5 or 6 meters. Sunlight shone in from the cave, illuminating the originally flickering supermarket. Li Anping slowly flew in from the cave, floating above Takuchi Aoda. Takuchi Aoda's face was gloomy, and a trace of despair flashed in his eyes. "Li Anping? Are you here to kill me?" Beside Takuchi Aoda, two dark cheetahs roared in a low voice, staring at Li Anping fiercely. "It depends on your choice." Li Anping glanced at the two cheetahs casually, and an astonishing murderous aura flashed by. The two cheetahs instantly wilted, whimpering in a low voice, hiding behind Takuchi Aoda with an innocent look. Takuchi Aoda asked, "Why did you find me?" Li Anping said calmly, "You smell like ash. And I have very good ears. I heard a lot of things when I went to Mount Fuji before." Looking at Takuchi Aoda, who had no resistance at all, Li Anping continued, "You want to live a free and human life. I can give it to you, but you have to do me a favor." Behind Takuchi Aoda, the ordinary people were already stunned. They wanted to escape and shout, but the mental force field rushed directly into their minds and took over the control of their bodies, making them unable to move even a finger. "What do you want me to do?" Li Anping pointed at the two leopards behind him and asked, "Can you control these monsters infected by ash?" Takuchi Aoda replied, "Yes." "That's it." Li Anping nodded and said, "I want you to restrain all the monsters. They can't leave Dongyang. They must stay in Dongyang forever. And I will send people to Dongyang later. You must assist them in their work." Takuchi Aoda asked, "Do you want me to be your subordinate?" "I want you to help me manage Dongyang after the disaster. As Gray's clone, you can control these monsters." "You are the perfect candidate," Li Anping said. "These monsters and Gray's corpse will be very useful to me in the future. Daxia will also send many people here. I can't protect them all the time." Takuchi Kingta only thought for a few seconds and realized that he actually had no choice. "I promise you." The next moment, Li Anping's figure suddenly shattered and turned into countless fragments that dissipated in the air. Takuchi Kingta's pupils shrank, and he was surprised in his heart. It's just a spiritual clone? And the mental scan just now, when did he have the mental ability? The original site of Mount Fuji, that is, the original location of Mount Fuji before the phase matrix was activated. Inside an ancient shrine. The guards here have long been killed in the disaster, and there are corpses of various monsters and ability users everywhere. Obviously, a fierce battle has taken place here before. Li Enping blasted the statue in front of him with a palm, and a purple monster-like longsword was inserted into the stone statue. The doctor stood beside Li Enping and smiled awkwardly. The secret of the Ten-Fist sword is here. Can I leave now? He had already arrived at the sea and was about to escape to the ice castle, but he was stopped by Li Enping, who fell from the sky. Under the pressure of absolute power, he took him to the secret base of the god's domain. Li Enping did not speak, and the doctor did not dare to leave. He could only watch Li Enping walk forward and pull out the strange long sword. Looking at the blade, there were countless Dongyang characters engraved on it, recording the practice method of the Ten-Fist sword. Seeing this, Li Enping finally nodded with satisfaction. Are you so afraid of me? The doctor smiled helplessly, because your power really scares me. Staying by your side, I feel like I'm on the surface of the sun. Li Enping didn't care, put away the demon sword, and said casually, you were my enemy before, and I was merciful not to kill you. How about this, you work for me for 50 years, and after 50 years, you will be free again. The doctor smiled bitterly, what if I say no? Li Enping looked at him unexpectedly and said coldly, I will kill you, then clone you, and let your clone work for me. Cold sweat fell on the doctor's forehead. He sighed and said, you are really direct, then my life will be yours for the next 50 years. After getting the practice method of the Ten-Fist sword, Dongyang has no urgent matters to complete for the time being. The next step is to wait for the staff of Daxia to come to Dongyang. They will send people to study monsters and Huey's body, which are both of great value. The monsters here can also become a good trial place for various new ability users in the future. Bai Xing will come to receive all the inheritance of the Divine Realm and the Dongyang government for Li Enping. As for the doctor, in addition to his ability, he is also an excellent talent. Li Enping plans to let the other party lay down the phase matrix in Tianjing, and then send him to the 8th Research Institute to work. After all, the battles that may be encountered in the future are becoming more and more fierce, and the high-level ability users and the demons that may appear have amazing destructive power. On the contrary, as the capital of Daxia, Tianjing lacks sufficient defense means, but the doctor's phase matrix plus Emma's space transmission should be able to make up for this well. After these arrangements are completed, Li Enping will not have to worry about high-level ability users sneaking into Tianjing when he is not there, or the aftermath of his battle in Tianjing causing damage like Dongyang. As for other bits and pieces, Li Enping plans to leave them all to his subordinates. He must seize the time, retreat with all his strength, complete the practice of the Hell Map, break through the limit of his body, and make his strength grow explosively again. The matter of Hui has sounded the alarm for him. He must hurry up to improve his strength. You know, the previous Hui took him so much effort, but it was not in a complete state. In order to face the powerful enemies that may appear in the future, he must improve his strength as soon as possible. However, before he closed his eyes, he still had some things to do. Li Enping focused his attention on the incarnation of Mind Qi. I saw a black shadow streaking across the sky like a meteor. The incarnation of Mind Qi was flying at its own extreme speed, passing through the five-star ocean and flying towards the direction of the western continent. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiong Go. Chapter 269. On the day of the Dongyang catastrophe, the western continent also encountered a storm. In just 3 hours, the 16 main bases of the Star Alliance in the western continent were attacked by unknown persons. For ordinary people, these were just bombings, arson, murder, and terrorist attacks far away from them. But for the top leaders of various countries, especially those with abilities, this series of attacks was no less than a major earthquake. According to eyewitnesses, the attacker of the Star Alliance was a male ability user wrapped in black thoughts. Strangely, during the attack, this ability user did not encounter a level 5 ability user of the Star Alliance, and the Queen of Heaven did not appear from beginning to end. Therefore, the attacker did not reveal any strong combat power. Instead, his flying speed surprised all countries. In the face of this attack, the Star Alliance was like a turtle, hiding all its core strength, and seemed to have made up its mind not to fight with the other party. Therefore, although their strength did not suffer any loss, the territory they had operated for many years in the western continent was swallowed up by various forces that took advantage of the opportunity. However, compared with the disaster in Dongyang, this was just an episode. In this incident, Li Anping once again showed a force that was enough to threaten the entire Western world. Whether it was the Amsite Federation, the Codex, or Tyrell, they all felt uneasy about it. So a large amount of funds were used for the research of the military, ability people, and various war weapons. And the Federation even aimed more than 50% of its nuclear warheads at Daxia across the ocean. The Dead Hand system was fully activated, which meant that once the Federation President and the Supreme Command were devastated by Li Anping, more than 50,000 nuclear warheads would be launched to countries around the world, especially 50% of them were all aimed at Daxia. Other countries with nuclear weapons also have similar nuclear bundling strategies. It's just that now, the target of defense has changed from the surrounding powers. It has become the man who is as powerful as a god on the eastern continent. However, these old powers are obviously not satisfied with passive defense. With the tilt of funds, various plans against Li Anping have been formulated. Amsite Federation, Sky City. In a conference room, famous physicist Jim Parsons looked nervously at the soldiers in the corridor with real guns and ammunition. Early this morning, the federal FBI agents found his home directly and sent him to the airport. Then he and dozens of other experts took a military plane to this long-famous air fortress. Along the way, he kept communicating with his companions, but he didn't understand why the federal military summoned them. After arriving at the conference room, he was even more shocked. The huge conference room was already full of hundreds of people. Jim looked carefully and found that there were many familiar faces. They were physics experts, physiologists, biologists, computer experts, astronautics, and even famous sociologists and psychologists. Jim didn't understand what they wanted to do at all. He could only find a seat and sit down. During the time he sat down, another group of experts walked in from the door. Suddenly, he felt someone patting his shoulder, turned his head, and saw a black man looking at him. The man stretched out his hand to him. He smiled and said, "Martin Smith, entomologist, hello." Jim also shook his hand, "Jim Parsons, theoretical physicist." Martin asked curiously, "Jim, do you know why the FBI invited us here?" Jim shook his head. Suddenly, a fat white man sitting in front of the two turned around and said, "They are not from the FBI. In fact, after we were sent here, we were no longer under the control of the FBI. Have you seen their uniforms? Their level can be much higher than that of the FBI." The fat man saw the two people stunned, smiled, and said, "White Carter, social scientist." The three introduced themselves again, and then heard the fat man White say, "I think something big must have happened this time, either an asteroid hit or an alien invasion." Just as the three were guessing what was going on, a cough spread throughout the venue through the microphone. I saw an old woman with a capable and energetic look, wearing a women's suit, standing on the podium. The blade-like eyes swept the entire venue, and everyone present fell silent instantly. Judy was silent for a while, turned on the projector, and a huge photo of Li Anping appeared behind him. Seeing the audience gradually become agitated, Judy Eno slowly said, "Everyone here is an elite in various industries and the top talents of the Federation. You are here today because a world-class crisis has threatened us. It seriously threatens the safety of everyone here. It threatens the life of every citizen of the Federation on this land under our feet. After a pause, she continued, perhaps some of you here have more or less known the existence of the ability user. Let me introduce myself here. My name is Judy M., and I am the General Manager of the Virtual Number Agency, the Federation's Ability User Agency. And behind me, the man in the photo, you may all know him. He is the current behind-the-scenes Emperor of Daxia, Li Enping. Judy changed her tone and said coldly, but there is one thing you may not know, Li Enping is also a person with special abilities, and he may be the most powerful person with special abilities in the world. His dangerous thoughts and terrifying strength have seriously threatened the safety of the entire planet. Seeing that many experts raised their hands and wanted to ask questions, Judy ignored them. Instead, he operated the touch screen on the podium and began to play information about Li Enping. Physical strength, can withstand machine gun fire within 10 meters, and can withstand air pressure at 7 times the speed of sound. Speed, the highest speed currently shown is 7 times the speed of sound. Strength, has a record of lifting a mountain of hundreds of millions of tons. Recovery ability, once in the Nuclear Protection Center for more than 5 seconds, with a large area of burns all over the body, and even some limbs were vaporized, but 3 hours later, he appeared unscathed 100 kilometers away. Information about Li Enping was listed one by one, even including the battles he started from, all of which were placed in front of hundreds of experts. The more they saw these materials, the more shocked these experts were. If it weren't for the previous FBI, they would definitely suspect that this was a joke. After playing all the materials, Judy looked at the people in the audience and said seriously, "It's not just his ability that is dangerous, but also his thoughts. As a dictator, his goal is to unify the world and bring everyone under his control. And now he has almost completed the unification of the entire East continent. I think it won't take a few years for him to set his sights on the Federation. So I need your help, whether it's physical, mental, or Li Enping's psychology, motivation, habits, and abilities, they are all your research goals. Your ultimate goal is only one. Kill Li Enping." The Li Enping Operations Department was established on this day. Similar departments have also been established in other countries. I don't know since when, Li Enping has become the #1 enemy of all Western countries. Somewhere in the Western continent, hundreds of kilometers high in the sky, a 1-kilometer-long black coffin-like thing is floating in the sky. This is the Ark of the Star Alliance. At this time, the Ark gathered all the superiors of the Star Alliance. But they were all like still statues, motionless, even the drifting gas, jumping water droplets, and clouds in the sky were still in mid-air, and the clock stopped moving, like a painting, motionless. After this situation lasted for a few seconds, everything returned to normal, the crowd continued to move, various gases drifted in the ventilation ducts, water droplets fell back to the water surface, and the clock started moving again. All the people in the Ark seemed not to notice the abnormality just now, and they were still doing what they had to do. Until half an hour later, everything fell into stillness again. In this way, the number of stillness increased, and the time of each stillness became longer and longer. It was like a strange world, slowly unfolding in this world. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xianglang Guo. Chapter 270. 1 month later, Tianjin, the deepest part of the 8th Research Institute. It was pitch black all around, with no light source. This was the place that Li Enping had someone build specifically. He would practice the hell map with all his strength here until he succeeded completely. Since Li Enping came back from Dongyang, he had someone build this place and then moved in. Although the Mind Chi incarnation made a big fuss in the Star Alliance base in the Western continent, he didn't find any Star Alliance leaders, and there was no news about the Queen of Heaven. These people seemed to have learned the news in advance and all hid. Li Enping originally wanted to get more spirit gems from her, but now there was no way. He speculated that after using the spirit gems, while getting the Queen of Heaven's 5th level ability, he would also have a slight connection with the other party, which enabled the Queen of Heaven to foresee his actions in advance and then evade. In the end, the Mind Chi incarnation had to come back. Li Enping didn't have time to play hide and seek with the Queen of Heaven. He still planned to complete the practice of the Hell Map first and break through the bottleneck of the physical body. The matter of the spirit gems would be discussed later. The secret room he was in now had no light source and was completely soundproof, because in order to concentrate on his work, Li Enping eliminated all possibilities that might cause him to have distracting thoughts. Here, vision and hearing were meaningless, and people could not contact the outside world at all. Except for the clones that were automatically sent in and out by the machine every day, there was nothing else that could disturb Li Enping. A normal person staying in such an environment would probably find it difficult to even feel the passage of time. There was no other sound except his own heartbeat. In a few hours, he would start to get irritated and go crazy. But Li Enping was no longer a normal person. He could endure the pain of being crushed to pieces, could complete hundreds of millions of calculations in 1 second, and could clearly remember everything from childhood to adulthood. Even if he didn't eat or drink, didn't see the light, and didn't communicate with people, he could exist like a fossil. And now, he eliminated all distracting thoughts and devoted himself to the practice of the Hell Map. Even the Daxia high-level officials wanted to contact him, but they couldn't. Li Enping had already issued a death order before, unless he met Emma, Bai Xing, and Fang Yuhuang. Doctor, a total of 4 level 5 ability users can't solve the problem, otherwise no one can disturb his practice. This time, Li Enping just sat cross-legged on the floor, and never used the operating table, mechanical arm, high-frequency knife, and other things from the last time. Because of the battle in Dongyang this time. Continuously using power beyond his limit, Li Enping has a better grasp of his body. Especially in the state of God, when he has a mental force field, Li Enping has scanned his body countless times, which makes him understand his body more and more, and the mastery of the blood body in the Hell Map has reached an incredible level. So now Li Enping. No need for the help of the operating table, he can complete the practice of the Hell Map by directly interfering with the body. In the past month, Li Enping has restored the transformation of the respiratory system again. If there is a microscope facing his stomach at this time, it can be found that the cells inside are gradually changing, and one by one is captured by the mind, completing an incredible evolution. This is the second system that Li Enping transformed, the digestive system. This will completely change his teeth, tongue, and esophagus. Stomach, small intestine, and other parts, remove the excess parts, and change the way he absorbs energy. Now with the strong control of the body, Li Enping's brain is constantly monitoring the cultivation status of the Hell Map. At the current speed, after 50 hours, the replacement of the entire stomach cells can be completed. After the stomach transformation is completed, my digestive ability will increase by about 180 times, and food will become an important source of energy. For the absorption of the body, it will also be more efficient. The specific value needs to be tested by eating clones. Li Enping is like a supercomputer, working non-stop for 24 hours without sleep, without any distractions, and all his thoughts are placed on the transformation of the body bit by bit. 20 days later, Li Enping, who was in the secret room, no longer sat cross-legged. He was standing on the ground, with his shoulders and elbows down, and a standard straight punch was thrown from his waist. With a light blow, the fist wind still hit the wall, making a crackling sound, which became the only sound in the entire secret room. Bone density needs to be adjusted. The coordination of impact joints has decreased by 7%. About 115,000 straight punch tests are needed to complete the transformation of the right arm movement system. After the transformation of the right arm movement system is completed, it can provide about 0.7 power increase. A series of data flashed silently in Li Anping's mind. Under the skin of his right arm, it was as if countless living things were crawling. His muscles and bones were slightly deformed. After all this stopped, he threw another straight punch, and then another long string of data flashed through his mind. Since completing the digestive system, Li Anping directly chose to transform the movement system. This may be the system with the greatest improvement in physical fitness and combat effectiveness among the 6 major systems. It can even help him improve some of his physical fitness before completing the cultivation of the Hell Map. At this time, Li Anping had completely entered a state of being completely focused. His eyes were closed, and there was only darkness. Various data about his body kept flashing through his mind. As he punched, he kept adjusting the bones, muscles, and joints of his right arm. With the help of the Hell Map, these 3 things gradually evolved and changed, completely breaking away from the limitations of bones, muscles, and joints, and almost becoming another organ. It has stronger resistance to blows, endurance, contraction, and other excellent properties. While Li Anping was practicing, a production line was running continuously outside the entire room, and the long conveyor belt surrounded the entire room several times. The conveyor belt was filled with human bodies with Qi logo all over their bodies. These were all clones made according to Li Anping's requirements. As soon as they came off the production line, they would be sent to the secret room where Li Anping practiced. While Li Anping was practicing, he was also harvesting these clones. These clones were placed on the conveyor belt, and after a circle around the practice room, they would be brought to other rooms along the conveyor belt. At this time, they are completely dead, and their bodies will be reused to create the next batch of clones. Relying on the amazing financial resources of the 9 royal families, this conveyor belt has been running for almost 24 hours, constantly sending fresh souls into Li Anping's mouth. At this time, Li Anping is like a black hole, taking away any life that approaches him. Another punch was thrown, and the violent fist wind directly hit the metal wall, making a loud bang and leaving a huge dent on the wall. Because of the constant adjustment of the movement system, Li Anping often cannot control the power of his right fist 100%. This kind of slightly strong force will occur. Muscle strength improves, coordination, speed decreases. In the adjustments again and again, Li Anping constantly corrects the balance between strength and speed. After all, it is simple to simply want strength or speed to go to extremes, but it is also very dangerous, and there are 2 obvious weaknesses in the battle. Especially similar to the pursuit of strength, which leads to increased burden on the body and reduced speed, it is not advisable. So what Li Anping pursues is the balance between speed and strength, especially since everyone's body has subtle differences, so he needs to test again and again to make adjustments so that both speed and strength can reach the highest transmission efficiency. With repeated adjustments, Li Anping's punching movements are becoming more and more smooth. Of course, Li Anping himself knows this best, because he monitors every cell in his body almost all the time and controls every force in his body. 50 days later, the motor system has been completely transformed. The physical fitness has now become 32.8 in strength, 33.1 in speed, and 33.7 in physical fitness. Although the physical fitness has leaped again, it is just that the physical limit has been raised after the motor system has been transformed, not that the limit has been broken, so Li Anping is not very excited. At this time, he is Qi logo all over, and the muscles on his body are almost invisible. His whole body has become completely streamlined, like a sculpture connected into one piece, giving people an inhuman cold feeling. Then Li Anping sat down again, without rest or pause, without any so-called laziness or distraction. Like a steel robot, he started the next system transformation.